The trial just started at the top of the hour, and we want to bring in our legal expert, attorney Jamie White, to really dive into what we expect to come out during this trial. Jamie, good morning to you, sir, and thank you for joining us on Good Day.
Good morning, guys. My pleasure.
So, start things off. For those of us, such as myself, I wasn't here when these events unfolded. Could you give us a quick recap of what's expected at this trial?
Sure. So, we're in state court. The two acquittals that you discussed in the opening were in federal court. These individuals are being charged in state court with multiple infractions of the law associated with the conspiracy to kidnap the governor. And what we can expect is a litany of digital evidence. We're going to see a foundation laid probably through the FBI associated with text, emails, secret recordings that were made at the time of the conspiracy. And that will take a significant period of time. And then we're going to probably hear from the two cooperating witnesses who are going to corroborate the prosecutor's theory that this was not just basement video gamers talking. These were overt acts taken by individuals who at least took enough of an action going forward to be charged under the law. And I would even go back to say that even talking in of itself can sometimes rise to the level of breaking the law. But these men took overt acts, so far as surveilling her home, setting up a mock home that they could practice the kidnapping itself. They have a huge hill in front of them. A great big deal has been made out of Antrim County being conservative and being Republican, and it is. I also have a home in this area. But these are good, reasonable people, and I suspect that the court is going to take a lot of care to make sure they understand the rules they're supposed to follow, and I suspect they will.
I was going to ask you, Jamie, if you could maybe give us a brief walkthrough of the jury selection process. I've sat through myself one jury selection on I think it was a dog bite case. But if you can just kind of give our viewers kind of what to expect, or what we may have expected for that process on Monday. I mean, how in depth do they go? They're really trying to just make sure people don't already have some preconceived notions or biases going into this.
So on Monday, I think everybody expected the selection process to take a little longer than it did. Judge Heyman is a very organized and disciplined judge and moved things along. But the way the process works is that each side has a certain number of challenges they can make. They don't need to justify them. There are some exceptions to that rule, but for the most part, they don't need to justify them. Each side gets 12 preemptory challenges. And the number of challenges is based on the amount of time an individual could receive. Each side could also challenge for cause, which means that you do have to lay a foundation for why this person can't be on the jury. And we saw multiple people excused for cause who said that, they could not render a fair verdict. Most of them politically inclined towards the defendants. And they were excused for cause. We have 18 people seated. Only 12 will actually be the judgment on this case. The rest will be alternates. The court does that in cases like this. In the event that people are excused or get sick or for whatever reason can't participate, we want to make sure that the case doesn't have to start all over. So all 18 will sit through the process, but only 12 will actually sit on the jury, and that will be a random selection as far as who is excused and who will actually deliberate this case.
And I would imagine, Jamie, one of those questions that may excuse a potential juror is, were you upset by the COVID restrictions, or did you have feelings of animosity toward the rules or the governor? That could potentially get someone excused from jury duty.
There's some of that. I didn't see all of the proceedings, but oftentimes people will come with preconceived notions. The idea is, especially in a case that's been nationally televised, there's nobody that isn't aware of what occurred. So the question becomes for the court is, can you put aside those preconceived notions, whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, or whatever your leaning is? Can you put those aside? That is the question. And in a case like this, the idea of finding someone who isn't aware of what's occurred is zero. So it's really about finding people that you believe can be reasonable and objective and put those feelings aside. I know there was at least one juror dismissed preemptively who said that, she felt, that the governor did everything right and so on and so on. So, there's both sides of this equation, but at the end of the day, the goal of the court and all the parties is to find 12 people who can be reasonable and follow the court's instructions, which will be quite specific in a case like this.
Now, Jamie, could you explain for us a little bit about the charges that these individuals are facing? I mean, you hear the word terrorism, it definitely makes you kind of, whoa, what? Yeah, exactly, because I'm curious, what qualifies this as a terrorist act through these charges?
That's a great question. We don't see this charge often, especially in state court. We see it more often in federal court. But what qualifies it outside of what I would say call your standard, if that's an acceptable way to describe a kidnapping, but a general kidnapping or intention to commit assault or home invasion is one thing. What qualifies as terrorism is when it's politically motivated or it is being done for the purposes of political influence. And that is what we have here. I mean, this clearly was an act that was in response to the governor's actions and during COVID. And it appears to be that they had political affiliations to begin with. They talked about trying her in an individual court of some sort and assassinating her ultimately. So these are political actions, and that is what takes it from what I would call your cookie cutter home invasion assault case to a terrorism case.
Jamie, we talked in the intro about the two men who were already found guilty, Brian Higgins and Sean Fix, right? And then there are two others who were acquitted. Can those two individuals be brought in to testify, or frankly, all four of them be brought in to testify? And secondly, how do the convictions and the failure to convict both, can those be brought in as discussion by either side during this trial?
So let me take your latter question first. No, the acquittals will not be admitted as evidence. They're not relevant. Those individuals are not on trial here in Antrim County. So that information, the jury will not have, at least on the record, access to that. As far as the cooperating witnesses, I suspect that this will be a game day decision by the prosecutors. They have an overwhelming amount of evidence against these three men. And, there's an old saying that, don't do too much. So, these men have agreed to cooperate. And I suspect that the prosecutors will evaluate their case over the course of the next couple of weeks and make a decision as to whether or not one or both of their testimony is necessary. The two individuals who were acquitted will not be called by the prosecutor. There's no question about that. They were acquitted. They have an agenda. They can't be tried again for these offenses. So the prosecutor has no interest in bringing them forward. And I don't know how relevant their testimony would be as it pertains to these three men, but I don't expect to hear from those two men that were acquitted.
But for example, the defense couldn't say, hey, these two guys were not guilty. Our clients are no different, as an argument.
It's a great question. In my opinion, that is not relevant to these three individuals who are being charged in Antrim County and their case and their particular cases. I wouldn't be surprised. I see the defense try to not only weave in those particular issues as far as the acquittals, but the defenses that led to their acquittals, which ultimately was the argument in short term was that they were entrapped by the federal government. But for the federal government, they would have never engaged in this sort of behavior. I think that the prosecutors, in Jackson County and now Antrim County have learned how to navigate that minefield of confusion, quite frankly, that was placed on the jury in federal court that led to the two acquittals that you've discussed. But I ultimately do not think that Judge Heyman is going to allow much of that to come in. I would be very, very surprised.
Well, Jamie, thank you so much for giving us your insight this morning. For our viewers out there who are more interested in what you do on a daily basis, where can they find more information on you, sir?
Well, I mean, I think honestly, Google it. I mean, you can't, if you were to Google the trial this morning, pretty much every single national outlet and certainly Michigan outlets are covering this very carefully. So we're going to hear more and more. I think this trial is going to last about 2 to 3 weeks, and I think we're going to see this thing develop substantially over the course of the next week or so.
Jamie White, thank you so much for being with us, sir. We'll share your information through our website as well, but it's good to have you back.